All right, welcome back, everybody. We saved the best for last. I want to call this the road less traveled. I got a whole group of medical students here, and we want to show you that you don't have to be the perfect platonic ideal applicant. That real life happens. That you can take a varied path and get to where you want to be. I'm going to ask each of you to start by introducing yourselves. Let's go by alphabetical order by first name. So Adam, would you start us off? Where are you right now?
I am a third-year medical student at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota.
Great. And Elizabeth?
I am a first-year medical student at Harvard University in Boston.
I'm I guess I'm a MPH student in between his second and third year of medical school at the University of Connecticut School of Medicine.
And I'm a third-year medical student at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, doing my clinical rotations in Montgomery, Alabama.
All right. Thanks to each of you for making time for us today. As always, pre-meds, if you got questions, ask them. We'll do our best to shoot those questions to our panel. But briefly, and this time let's go in reverse alphabetical order. So Rachel, you're still on the hot seat. Start me out with, how did you make the choice that doctoring was going to be the thing for you?
Yeah, I think I was young. I think I was probably like 12 when I was like, I think this would be the thing to do. So I actually went to college with the idea of going straight to medical school. I did all of my pre-med requirements. And I think like even through college, I really wanted to. I just kind of got to a point where I was like, I don't know if I should do it right now. So that kind of led me onto a bit of a different path before medical school. But it was just one of those things that always stuck around on the back burner. I stayed kind of in the game as an EMT even while I wasn't officially in medicine. And so that kind of kept me in the game for a while until I really dove back in.
Henry, was that similar for you? Did you know early?
No, I had pretty much the polar opposite experience. I from about age 11 or 12 wanted to be a lawyer. So everything I did was law. Went to college, went to a school that was known for a good pre-law program, majored in history and political science, did all my internships at law firms. Got to be the summer before I was going to graduate college, a semester early. So essentially, right before my last semester of college, realized that this wasn't for me. Worked in insurance sales for a bit, worked in financial sales for a bit, tried to start a business. None of that went quite for me. And then eventually said, all right, medicine. And the thing that got me there, well, there were a few things that got me there. One of them was I helped out with the cleanup effort down in Hurricane Sandy, New York City, where I'm from. And when that hit in 2012, I realized that I had really no tangible skills for contributing to society with my hands. And I was watching one night as they evacuated NYU Langone Hospital, and they were keeping the pediatric patients alive by manually pumping their lungs as they went down the stairs. And I said to myself, wow, I wouldn't want to do that every day, but I'd want to know I could do that. And so I started really thinking about what I wanted out of life and the fulfillment I sought in life. And that was October. And by January, I was back in school.
Neat. Elizabeth, what about you? You're early, late, somewhere in between?
It was definitely more like Henry, whereas a little bit later on. So both of my parents are researchers. So during college, I wanted to be a math professor, did math research, and was like, no, never mind. So I ended up going to graduate school for biochemistry. And during that time, my research was actually in a cancer institute. So doing cancer research and being around patients was, so during graduate school, I guess I was like 22 when I decided that I wanted to do medical school afterwards. But so what appealed to me about medicine was it takes research and applies it. And so right now, the program that I'm in is specifically for physician scientists. So I definitely was a little bit later in the game, but don't regret it at all. And I really like what Rachel mentioned about, sort of saying it's for me, but is it right now for me? So yeah, I don't think that after college it would have been for me.
Oh, interesting. So you needed that time to ripen before
I
you were
definitely
ready.
think so. Yeah, definitely.
Adam, what was your experience? How did you decide that it was going to be medical school?
Well, early on, I had dropped out of high school because I decided I wanted nothing to do with that. And I was raised in a martial arts studio, so I had left and I helped my master run the studio. And over time, I really fell in love with our discipline as a tool for uniting people's minds, bodies, and spirits in a way that empowers them to really thrive and live as their best self. So as I taught for maybe towards the end of my first decade, I realized that I wanted to pursue that to a level of mastery, the ability to figure out what's going on in someone's life and empower them to live their best one. And that led me to go back to college. At the time, I couldn't even get into the local community college, so I went to this after-school tutoring program with 10-year-olds, and I had a beard, and they were teaching me how to do long division. And I managed to finagle my way into the community college, and from there sneak through the back door of the state school. And from there, I did a master's in medical sciences with a focus on community health at Brown, and then to medical school. And I'm just sort of chasing that natural curiosity, which was born on the mat.
Wait a second. I thought that in order to become a doctor, you needed to have a perfect application, right? You needed to do the things in exactly the right amount of time, and you had to have the perfect Mcat score, and you had to have all of the right grades, and you had to have the right internship and more hours than they say that you needed. And then your personal statement had to be about how you had it's like American Idol, right? It was everything is against you, and right. Are you telling me that I've been lied to?
Yes. Completely. There's fundamentally two approaches to winning the game. And one of them is to play it the way everyone else plays it and hopes that you just happen to be slightly above the mean. The other way is to play a completely different game. Instead of trying to be better than everyone else at being everyone else, just be yourself and be the best at that, because no one can compete with that. And the thing is, the brain is wired to perceive novelty. So when you go and apply and you speak with conviction and authenticity, you stand out by virtue of your authenticity and not by virtue of the length of your CV, which I would argue is a far less meaningful metric. So you can absolutely do it this way if you choose to.
How did you guys deal with, and I'll throw this out to the group, so whoever feels inspired. Somebody at some point said to you, but you're gonna be X years old when you graduate from medical school. How did you respond to that, or how did you rationalize that?
I mean, for first off, Adam, a lot of what you were talking about kind of resonates with me. I don't know what you practice, but I boxed for 6 years. And there's not too many amateur boxers who go through to medical school, and I did school at community college, so that resonates with me too. And the first thing people told me when I was doing all my post-bac classes through community college was they didn't even say to me, you're going to be X years old when you're a doctor. They said to me, you're never going to become a doctor because you're doing it at a community college. And I told them to go fry ice. Like, no, I'm going to do it my way. Kind of exactly what Adam said. And I'll find a way to get in. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. My classmates always kind of jab me for they call me grandpa. They say they're going to buy me a walker for when I start third year rotations so that I can get, to and from safely. But the fact of the matter is, you don't start living life after you become a physician. You start living life the moment you decide to start living life. And so if you decide right now that perfectly in line with what Adam said, you're going to be your best you, you're going to do the things you want to do and pull out of life what you want. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter when you get there. I can't imagine that the day I graduate and I have MD next to my name, and the day I'm done with my training and residency, that I will suddenly be this new person. I'll still be me. So, the amount of time it takes for me was always just kind of insignificant. It doesn't matter. I'm living my life right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think also what Adam was saying about kind of this novelty approach, I think kind of there's two ways that people started looking at gap years. And one way is like doing the gap year to make everything perfect. And then I think the other way is doing a gap year because you feel like you just need to kind of explore more. And I think when you take the explore approach, it's more about kind of you doing things that you feel like you need to do to be a whole person. And I think when you do it that way, and that's kind of how I felt. I was a teacher for 6 years before I went back to apply to medical school. And I think during that time, even though I kind of had medicine on the back burner, I wasn't teaching to put it on my resume to become a doctor, to get into medical school. I was teaching because I was trying to figure out who the heck I was. And because of that, I had all of these really cool experiences in those 6 years that when I went to apply to medical school, they were like, wow, that is interesting. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I guess it is, but I never thought of it that way. And now that I'm in school, I don't think people look at me and are like, gosh, you're going to be an old resident. Like, I don't think anyone's ever approached that. Maybe they say it like when I'm not there. But what they do say is they're like, oh my gosh, like you've done a lot of stuff by 30. And I was like, I mean, I guess like I just took advantage of kind of everything that was out there. And because I wasn't necessarily trying to fit myself into this box of an applicant and I was just doing whatever kind of doors opened, it let me do a lot more stuff that ended up making me a decent applicant just because it was stuff that I wanted to do.
I can't say I've really had to comment too much, maybe because I don't look, how old am I? 27. I know someone asked how old were you when you applied? I don't remember with COVID. It's probably like 10 years ago now. But I think for me, I did ask myself the question. I was like, all right, I already have a higher education degree. Do I really want to be 31 and just starting residency and still making no money and having my parents be like, why are you still a student? Well, no, my parents have been very supportive. But I think that kind of echoing what everyone else has said, this is something that I really wanted to do. So I think that following my interests and following what I see myself being happy with has been like the most important thing, not so much the age. And for everyone who's feeling old out there, who is older than me, I've actually had a 50-year-old student, so applying to medical school. So there's a whole age range of people who are younger and older.
Can I jump in real quick with something just kind of to the point? Because Elizabeth, what you just said kind of cued this in me and bring up the student who asked, about age. I don't know about the other folks here, but I would rather, like what Rachel was saying also resonated. The life experiences I gained, on the one hand, you say to yourself, okay, I'm starting school older. But on the other hand, I feel like whenever I've interacted with patients, because I've had longitudinal work with patients over the first 2 years, I can relate to people. I've worked a job. I've paid my bills. I've struggled to find health insurance on the exchange. You do these things and your patients you're able to connect with. I tell you, I'd rather feel older than my peers, but be able to connect to my patients than feel like I have a world of difference between me and the person sitting on the exam table. And I felt like the years in between where I really carved out who I was have helped me be able to connect it to my patients. And that's why we go, like we say, that's why we go into the field. And so then to actually have it, I think counts for a lot. So, and to that person, I was 28 when I started med school, and we have a 41-year-old in our class.
Yeah, 100% the same thing that Henry said. It's like, I feel like it's been forever now. I think I was 27 or 28 when I applied. I'm about to be 31 and I'm a third year. So however that math works out. But I think it's the same thing. I've been in clinical rotations now for about 8 months, and it's so much more natural for me to go in and just talk to a patient on day one of my clinical rotation than for some of my peers who are like 8 years younger than me, because they haven't had to do that. Like when you go straight through academia, you don't have a lot of interactions with people that are outside of your age group. And so doing something like teaching, I've interacted with parents, I've interacted with kids, I've interacted with the community, I've done work with geriatrics, and it's just like, and not in a medical setting. So you don't just see everybody as a patient, you see them more as a human, I think, because I was able to get these experiences outside of medicine for so long. And so, yeah, what Henry was saying is completely accurate. You have this different, it honestly makes it a lot easier, at least in third year. And I'm sure beyond that as well, I just don't know yet. It makes it easier to connect. It makes it easier to kind of do things naturally without having to practice how to talk to people.
Well, and I would say too, you're going to be 30, you're going to be 35, you're going to be 40, you're going to be 45, right? You're going to be that age anyway. If you want to be a doctor at that age, you got to start. Right? So that is okay. Right. So I as a person who really, I don't know that I've grown up yet. Right, like you continue to just figure it out as you go, right? And we have a student asking, well, what options do I have? What considerations should I make when taking a gap year if I don't want to do a master's degree? Do you all agree that you're asking the wrong question, right? It's not what do I want to put on my application. It's
What do you want to do?
what do you want
wanna
to do?
Yeah, what do you want to do? Go do it.
Yeah, I would comment on the term gap year. It makes it seem like you're taking a break from your life if you're not in school. And I think that's hugely problematic. Moreover, you shouldn't relegate yourself to a set of things that other people have done, because that's a surefire way to make sure you never contribute anything authentic to the world. Rather, think about who are you? What do you have to give? What do you want to see or experience or accomplish? And just go for it in your way. If you feel like you need to learn a new skill set, go get a degree. If you feel like you can make money serving that purpose, go get a job. And if none of the above count for you, if you want to sit around playing Xbox and writing children's stories, then do that too. You live your own life.
We talked to a panel of gap yearers earlier, and right, we had people that hiked the AT, right, and somebody was working as a medical device salesperson, right, and like do the thing, right, and if that thing doesn't work, well, then try something else, and if this is just a temporary thing, all the more reason to experiment big, right? Because if you're like, well, I think I'm going to apply for med school next year, great, you've got 8 months, right, to a year to fill up. This is the only time you're going to be this age. How are you going to spend it, right? Like, what's the off the wall thing that you want to dare yourself to do?
There's also just,
go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say there's so few times that you're gonna get once you're in medical school to just drop everything and do whatever it is that you want to do at that point. And so a gap year is just an opportunity for you to say, there's something else out there for me, like let me go find it before you start to commit your whole life. And that was a big part for me in college. I was like, I'm just not ready to dive in yet and not see what else is around. And so that's the way to look at a gap year. It's not like, there's no right answer to a gap year.
I think as well that it doesn't even need to be something like a job or travel, especially during COVID right now. I know that there's a lot of financial constraints and things like that, but one of the things that I didn't take a gap year in my education, but the summer between college and graduate school, I didn't work. I just went home to spend time with my family because I knew that was going to be the last summer that I would be probably with them based on like graduate school. So you can also just take time with your family, take time with people you love. And, I think that's important to remember as well. Like if you're going to be a doctor, you need to remember that it's not about the title necessarily. It's what you want. And it's, make sure you're taking care of yourself too.
I happen to know that I also have a group of Mcat experts in the room, and somebody asked, I'm really intimidated by all the stuff. Where do I start? Where should they start?
Personally, I mean, I would start by approaching that intimidation. Start there, because if you're gonna turn the exam into this Goliath, it'll be hard to face it. It's a test. At its core, it's an exam, and you'll never be defined by an exam entirely. It won't be on your tombstone. It won't be what people talk about when they think about you. And frankly, once you get into medical school, nobody will care anymore. Unless you want to get a job with Kaplan, in which case then you'll care because you'll continue teaching the exam. Because I can't speak for everyone else here, but when I did well on it, I thought I was going to be done with it forever, and then here I am still teaching it. So in that context, maybe then you'll still care about it. But I would start with approaching that intimidation, reframing it. It's an exam, it's not a life-defining moment.
Yeah,
I like totally res. Go ahead, Adam.
Well, I would just say most of the anxiety about this exam, and it holds for the licensing exams in medical school too, most of the anxiety is not because it's a really high mountain. It's because everyone is just very anxious about it. And it's an echo chamber. You ask for someone's story and they tell you how they studied, and you say, I could never do that. Well, maybe you could never do how they study, but that doesn't mean you can't do it just as well your own way. So what I advise students who are beginning is take a practice test and just learn the questions, figure out how each question should have been approached, and then do it again, and just do that a few times and take the exam. And fundamentally, that's all you do, whether without a tutor or a Kaplan course, something to supplement. But as long as you're doing that, you can do it your own way, and don't let anybody freak you out with their strange or neurotic study approaches.
Yeah, I struggled with the like kind of MCAT fear a lot when I was trying to decide when to make the jump back to med school. And to be honest, that probably delayed me a year or two into deciding to jump. And it was a lot of, I literally had a box of MCAT books that had been like hand-me-down MCAT books from other people that I'd already made a career jump and like given them to me. And I moved probably 3 times and brought the box with me every time without ever opening one. And I don't know what it was that like made it so terrifying, but one day I was just like, I either have to do this or I have to not do this. And I just signed up and took it. Like I just took a practice test and then I just signed up for the thing, and it made it so much less scary because I think it's just this thing, especially when you haven't been in school for a while, you've been doing something else, and it's just this like mountain, like Adam was saying, where just like it's the unknown that is scarier. And
Yeah.
so once I just took one, I was like, oh, like I can figure this out. And so from there, it got a lot less scary to make the whole jump of like, gosh, I'm going to change careers and like really do this. But I think there's something about ripping that Band-Aid off that makes it a little bit better.
Agreed.
I did something similar to Rachel, where I had sort of like MCAT study guides. I think for me, the first place was to figure out, okay, what exactly was on the exam. So for me, if I could figure out what the topics were, and if I had like a instead of like an infinite list, like a definite list, for me that was much more manageable. Whereas like a checklist where I could say, okay, I've done psychology, I've done whatever, and I actually hadn't taken any psych before, so that was all self-studying. So I was like, oh my god, what am I going to do here? So just having a defined set of material, like for example, I actually did use the Kaplan books for my study in the AMC materials. So having the Kaplan books there, I just went through all the subjects in them, and then I felt like I had a manageable amount of things that I needed to do. So it was, for me, it was organizational up front, and then I could figure out how to tackle that information.
Start.
Mhm.
Yes.
The start. But there is, right, and I'm sure that y'all must have felt this at times, right? Those moments of guilt or shame or doubt, right? Am I on the right path? Why didn't I do this years ago? How do you push through that? How did you what overcame those barriers for you?
Just remind myself I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die anyway. Honest to goodness, people live their lives as if they're immortal. Like if you mess up here, it's a chaos theory and you're gonna be really messed up in 300. You're gonna die pretty soon, and it doesn't really matter. It, it, but I don't say this to be a nihilist, but to say that what's the point of your life if not to feel somewhat fulfilled? If this is what fulfills you, go for it. And if you fail according to someone's metrics, you probably succeeded massively by someone else's. So it's not a matter of figuring out if you're on the right path, because the right path is arbitrarily and subjectively defined. It's, are you on your own path? Or are you so worried about stepping off the one that someone else has laid out for you that you're unwilling to pave what is your right to pave with your life? That's just my 2 cents, though.
It's not nihilistic if you're doing the work, right? Then it's just existential.
I had a similar idea to Adam. It wasn't quite so nihilistic where I was like, well, I'm gonna die, so better start now. It was more of like, wait, I'm an adult, I can do what I want. So if I wanted to go to medical school, so I applied. It was more just like, if I want to have cookies for breakfast, I'm gonna have cookies for breakfast. If I want to apply to medical school at the age of, I don't know how old I was. I'm 27 now, so I guess 26. I'm gonna do that because that's what I want. And I also figured that if I want it, then I need to actively go for it, because if I don't try, then the possibility that I'm going to be a doctor, well, I have a PhD, I'm a different type of doctor, but if I want to be a medical doctor, if I don't apply, chances are 0%.
I don't think mine had anything to do with dying. I
Cheers.
think mine was more guilt. And it was guilt in like a different way though, because so I taught high school and I literally was telling these high school kids, like, go after your dreams. Like you can do whatever is out there. Like, you don't have to know yet. Just kind of, you can figure it out. And I'm telling kids this for years, and I'm sitting there like knowing I probably want to be a doctor and just not jumping off the cliff. And so every time I gave that speech, like at the beginning of the year, I was like, I am a total phony. And so after doing that for 5 years, I was like, I either have to choose, like I have to figure this out. And so I think there was some guilt there, but then I think there was a lot of imposter syndrome on the other side of it to say like, now I just like felt super behind, and I was like, they're never going to want me. Like I've already made this choice, and I thought I'd stay. I thought I'd take 2 years, and now we're looking at 7. Like it's just, there was both sides, and I think it was hard on both sides because I felt like an imposter in both situations. But I will say, once I like crossed the threshold and actually did it, I didn't really feel that anymore at all. If anything, I felt like kind of stronger in my convictions to go to med school. If I had applied as a senior in college or a junior in college, I would never have been able to answer a question about like if this was truly the right path. But like answering that question on the interview trail after being out of it for a while, I was sure. And I could tell people like I would not be making this choice if I wasn't 100% sure that this is what I wanted to do.
You guys time for a quick story, like real quick story. All right, so you talked about guilt or how am I going to go forward? I actually did quit once. I did quit chasing medicine, and I remember the day because it was December 12th, 2014, and I remember that because it was my 24th birthday, and I had an organic chemistry final coming up, and I mean we all went through that, and some of you probably had it smoother than I did, but I was in that like I can't do this place with OChem. So, I remember sitting on the kitchen counter and saying to my mom and dad, I was over at their place. And I said, I maybe I should have gone to law school. I don't think I should have done this. And the next day I was supposed to go to this event with my organic chemistry professor. So I said, even though I quit, I'm going to go because, maybe she'll pass me. If I show up to this thing voluntarily on a Saturday morning, maybe she'll cut me a break and I'll at least get a B. And wouldn't you know it, as fate had it, at that event, I ended up meeting the person who would take me under their wing and mentor me and guide me and send me on the right path to medicine. He had been on an admissions committee for 40 years at a school in New York, and he personally helped me every step of the way. And if I had not shown up and gone that day, I probably would not be in medical school. But for some reason, I kept pushing forward. And that was a big moment for me in saying, okay, I'm going to do this because that was was I willing to push it one extra day kind of moment. And I did it. And once I saw that, I said, okay, now I'm going to push it every day. Now I'll do it. And that was a big turning point for me. And so after that, I took the Mcat and didn't do well and applied to med school and didn't get in. It took me 2 Mcats. It took me 2 cycles. But once I had crossed that path, I said, okay, that's it. Nothing's stopping me. That was too much divine intervention. I'm a religious guy. For me, that was a bit too much divine intervention. Like, I'm going to keep pushing forward.
We had a question come in about the personal statement. My guess is that hearing each of you talk about how you recommitted to this path and how that felt really authentic to you, the personal statement was actually probably not that hard to write. Am I wrong on that? Tell me.
It took 6 months. I work as a medical admissions consultant, and the thing took me 6 months the first time. Now I'm applying to residency, and I have a first draft, and it's terrible. I mean, yes, it's hard. It's hard. It is. But you just realize that all you need to do is, and the purpose of the personal statement is to impose a sense of relevance on all of the things you list on the application. There's an application that says I played the tuba and I swam and I did this job. Well, nobody cares, applicant number 472. You're not that special despite what mom said. You have to make them believe it. And so when you write about what you learned as a musician that led you to want to play sports and what your teammates taught you that made you really want to understand the human condition, leading to your bachelor's in anthropology, now all of a sudden you have this whole AMCAS or TMDSAS or ACMS application that has all these things that really make sense. Like, yes, I understand how this person has come to be. And so the admissions committee can look at it and say, I know who this person is going to be and how they're going to fit with our mission statement or not. And that's a great personal statement. It takes time and reflection It's not just something that you can contrive. We can talk like this because we've been through that process of self-discovery and articulation, and you can do it too.
Seems like it should have been easy and it wasn't. Like, when I sat down, I was like, this should be easy. I have a lot of stuff I have a lot of stuff. And then I sat and stared at a blank page for like days. I'm also like a professional procrastinator when it comes to writing. And I probably wrote it in like 5 minutes sitting in bed one night because I was like, maybe I'll just write. And it like happens. But kind of like what Adam was saying, I think the key is you have to take all of the things that you've done and figure out why that makes it why that's going to make you a good physician, and like explain that. So it's not just like, I've done all these things, so you should take me. It's like, I did this thing and like, gosh, this is what I figured out about myself. And so I like remember one particular story that I put in mine about a kid that I taught who just like could not figure out how to show up to my class on time, and just like the creative solutions I used to get him there, which resulted in me running a mile in gym class with like a bunch of teenagers. But the point was like, it seems like such a silly story. Like when I was talking to somebody about it, it seems like such a trivial thing to have happened in like the last 7 years of my life. But it proved my point of like, I will find a creative solution to solve a problem. And like, that's just what I wrote about, was all of these ways that different things in my life had shown that I could be creative. So I think if you just kind of you just got to think about like what kind of makes you you. And it does take a lot of self-reflection. And it sounds like Adam's a lot better at that than I am. But you do have to kind of just sit down and think through like, what are the things that like make me who I am? And like, how are the things that I've done, how do they show that, instead of me just telling someone like, hey, I'm a creative soul, but I can't draw. So like, you got to think about it. It's not easy though.
I want to hear the long form story of the gym running a mile afterwards.
I had to go back and teach after too.
Let's bring up one like nugget, is the personal statement needs to be personal, and maybe that's what's so difficult about it, right? Is you do need to tell a story, and so finding the right story to tell, because you only get so many characters, is.
I think that was, for me, the way I would phrase it, easy to write, hard to edit. I had no, like, I mean, I'm a writer, so I don't mind writing, but the thing that was hard for me, most of it was easy for me to get down, and then editing it down from 10,000 characters to 5,300 was a challenge, because I ramble a bit. But the thing that was difficult for me to put down were some of the more challenging aspects of my upbringing. So I grew up in a fairly violent environment. I have 2 disabled parents. We've had a lot of kind of just unsuspectingly bad things happen to us over the years, and it was hard to put them down. And given my upbringing, I felt like I didn't want to be some mercy case, and I felt like, as I was telling the story of where I come from and how I grew up, that I was going to be, some mercy acceptance from a medical school. And I remember venting that to my mentor, who I met at that event. And he said to me, well, do you want to be a doctor? I said, yeah. He goes, then tell the story. And that's what got it there. So, it is personal, and it is hard to share that sometimes. And I definitely exposed some open wounds in that personal statement, because I wanted them to see where I was coming from. And it's still not easy for me to do it, but it is personal. And if you want them to see who you are, you have to be willing to show some of yourself, maybe not all of yourself, but some of yourself to them.
So I'm just going to brag for a second. This is one of the things that I love about working at Kaplan. I am quite sure about the answer to this question. Did any of you want to be a Kaplan employee when you were a small child? Is this what you wanted to do when you grew? No? No.
Didn't cross my mind.
No,
No.
really didn't come up. This is one of my favorite things about working here is nobody meant to be here, right? Everybody just somewhere along the way you fell into it. And somebody asked earlier, how did you get involved in Kaplan? It was just one of those things, right? That came up, and so, but I have a different question. Why are you still here?
The people are awesome. I mean, that's definitely one of the reasons. Like the students, the people we work with. I mean, you guys are obviously awesome. So it's just a great work environment, and I think it's just really nice to be able to with that supporting environment, it's much easier to help people who want to take the MCAT and go to medical school. So there's so many resources, and I feel like we actually are trying to help our students. So there's never been any doubt for me about that.
Yeah, I actually ended up teaching the same MCAT course that I took before I got into medical school. I was like in a grad program and they offered the class and I took it because it was part of the grad program, and then I did well in the MCAT, and then Kaplan came, and then the next year they're like, hey, do you want to teach that class at that grad program the next year? And I did, and it was super fun. But I think like it's people are great, but it's also I feel like I owe like a bit of a debt because Kaplan helped get me to medical school. Like I'm not gonna hide that fact. The books and the tests, and like I wouldn't have done as well as I did on my own without that. And I know that because I tried. Like I just randomly took an MCAT with no prep, and that was not a good choice. And so I think that's part of it where like I felt really lost going into the medical school application process, and I didn't really have anybody mentoring me like it sounds like Henry did. Like I was kind of just swimming in a sea on my own until I kind of found a Kaplan class and a teacher who was like, yeah, like I can help with that. And so I feel like I'm kind of able to do that as a Kaplan instructor. And I think that's why I've stuck around for so long. Like I literally do this after I get home from clinicals at night and I still enjoy it.
For me, it was a little multifaceted. One is that I love teaching, so that part's easy. Teaching's easy, but there's a bunch of ways you could teach, right? Why teach here? I love teaching. I love mentoring pre-meds, and I started a whole organization at my school where we do that. And we've got like 80 pre-med students, and we've got like this mentoring thing set up, and we give them clinical opportunities and all. And so that is part of it. But the other part of it, to be perfectly open with everyone, I mean, I was helping support my family, and my parents are, like I said, are both disabled, and it was work or have them lose their home, and I wasn't going to have the latter happen. And so I worked the first 2 years of medical school, helped keep them afloat. Now they're sound. I managed to get them solvent, and at this point, I'm like, well, I'm already used to working in medical school. I might as well just make some money for myself now. Doing things that I enjoy doing and working with a good group of people. And our coworkers are fantastic. There's one guy who hangs around and he knows who he is. And when he sees this, he'll know I'm talking about him. I don't know about him. He's kind of iffy, but everyone else is really good. And a pleasure to work with. The students are fantastic. It gives me something to do that's productive and gets me away from school, which is really nice.
Oh, I mean, for me, multiple reasons, but I think a very big one is that it makes me feel like my life matters every day. Teaching saved my life, and you never know when the kind comment you make or the bit of support you give someone is going to change the way they live the rest of their years. And so any day that I teach, I feel like I would be proud of if I died tomorrow. And when you live like that, it's easier to let the little things like exams or whatever else is frustrating just go, because those things don't define me. I define myself by the outcomes of the people I try to serve. So that's why I still work here.
Yeah. Well, you are at this point all mentors and guides along this journey. How did you find the mentors and guides that got you to where you are now? Was that intentional? Was it an accident? How did that happen?
I think just being open, and sort of, it's hard to be open with many people, but because you'll face rejections or indifference. But when you are open with people, you end up running into some who really resonate with who and what you are, and they become your mentors. And so I suppose it's just a bit of luck and a bit of being open to receive the goodness of the universe when it pops up in front of you.
I mean, like I said, I had a really hard time finding any mentors. I just kind of felt I was teaching, like I wasn't in an environment where there were lots of doctors and people around. I don't come from a family of, no one in my family has ever done medicine. So there wasn't really a lot that I felt like I found prior to med school. And I also have a hard time just like, I don't like just having conversations generally with random people.
Thanks for
That
making an
I
exception
find,
for us. We
well,
appreciate
no,
that.
I like, I don't mind, it's very bizarre, but I feel like something like this is so different than like just kind of, you know, med school, you get all these like faculty student events where like people just randomly walk up to faculty and like start talking about their lives, and that is so foreign to me. And I would go to them and I'd just be like drinking water in the corner, staring at like what I was supposed to be doing. And so I found it really hard to find mentors, honestly, and didn't have good luck until I started like just realizing if I just like did the things that I liked and worked really hard at them, then the people that were in those spaces ended up taking an interest in me as well. And so it doesn't have to be like this artificial thing where you go and you're like, I want you and I'm going to talk to you until you like me. It was one of those things where I just showed up in clinic and I just did the things that I really enjoyed. And like the doctor that I was working with was like, you're going to be really good at this and I'm going to help you. And that's kind of how I found mentors in the last couple of years.
Mine was probably about a mix of effortful searching and then definitely luck. So kind of like Rachel, I don't come from a family of like anyone who does anything medical. Like I have an aunt who is a nurse, but little bit of a different route there. So when I was in graduate school and I decided that I wanted to become an MD later on, I actually sought out an advisor. So when I joined a lab, I found an advisor who was MD PhD. So his career trajectory was sort of along the same path that I wanted to go. So when I was choosing a lab, that was one of the things I was considering, like in addition to like a number of other factors, but that he turned out to be extremely helpful in terms of advising me on like how to craft a personal statement, what I should be thinking about. For the Mcat, I was on Reddit a lot. I'm not gonna lie. So that was a lot of Kaplan, a lot of AMC practice questions, and a lot of Reddit.
I mean, I told the story about how I kind of walked onto one, but I really want to, like, a theme that I saw that comes across is you need to have your eyes open, but not be searching, right? So you and I thought what Adam said about being receptive to the good that the universe brings upon you is important. It's these opportunities, they cross your paths. They cross your paths more often than you probably realize, but are your eyes open to them? Are you looking for them? And are you and to harken back to kind of where we started, are you doing the things that you enjoy? And that's what puts you in a position to be around people who are thinking like you, value what you value, and pursuing kind of a similar philosophical path down life. And when you are doing those things and you have your eyes open, it will find you. You just need to be patient and continue living your life, not searching for it. Well, like finding somebody to date. If you're looking for it, it doesn't happen.
And kind of go maybe I would say against that, but kind of in addition to it, there is nothing wrong with also putting yourself out there.
Mm-hmm.
Like so, definitely, I think Henry's on the track. It's like you come off as like too desperate, then that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are active, like if for example, the dating analogy, you know, you have to go outside. Like you can't spend all of your time in lab and at your house like I do. You have to actually like go. And again, with COVID, it's a little bit different. But you know, email people, reach out, because what's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to say no, and then you say thank you, and then you move on. Like when I was looking for labs, I've had so many no emails given back or be like, no, sorry, not going to happen. And it's like, okay, cool. Next thing, please.
The
Yeah,
best
and
pickup
actually,
line is "Hi, I'm Jed." Right? It's the same thing
Yeah.
when you try to meet anybody, right?
Yeah, I know it's
But
a lot. It's really hard. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
no, you're fine. It is hard. I was just gonna say I didn't do a good job of that, and I wish that I had done that sooner. But I think there's also a lot of really genuine people in medicine who like offer to be mentors, and you don't think they're being serious because you don't want to like take up too much of their time or like be a you know, be an extra burden on them, but like they're being honest. And I think I didn't take up enough people who said like, hey, here's my email address, reach out to me if you need anything. And I did not do a good job of that early on and have been working on doing a better job. But when people offer you like help or like and you connect with them, like take them up on it, send them an email. Like Elizabeth was saying, like the worst thing they do is get busy and not reply, but they might reply and that might be a really good connection.
And there's also non-med school mentors, and don't sleep on that stuff. You know, I have some folks who mentor me, and they mentor me about like what a healthy marriage looks like because my parents did not have one. Like that's still useful. There are other areas in your life that you need to have mentorship. So don't put all your eggs in just the medical mentorship basket. Keep your eyes open at all times. There's a lot of guidance out there if you seek it and if you have your eyes open for it, and if you're willing to let it come to you.
Yes, 1818 brought this back to where I was going to go next, which is letters of recommendation, because sometimes you do need a tangible thing. Sometimes you are searching for someone to ask for a thing. How'd you guys pick? Because it probably wasn't obvious who to ask for y'all.
The worst thing that can appear on a letter of recommendation, and mind you, it is recommendation, not evaluation, so it's going to be good. But the worst thing that can appear on it is an unsubstantiated claim. So if someone has a bunch of verbiage in there that, you know, Adam is this and this and this and this, and the reader is left thinking, what led you to think that? Then it looks like fluff. And if all of them are fluff, that's bad. So the best way to make sure it's not fluff is to make sure it's someone you spent time with. So not necessarily the head of the research department, but the grad student you worked under, or the PI you worked under. Somebody who would recognize your face in the crowd at the very least, and who can qualify who you are. Because remember, what we're trying to give the admissions committee is a sense of how you will resonate with their program. And the more substantiated it is, the more compelling of an applicant you are. That said, it can be anyone. Schools have different requirements, and pre-health advising offices have different requirements. You want to check those boxes. But for me, for example, my family dentist was one of them. A boss that I had 6 years before I applied was one of them. Then there was a science professor and a psychology professor. And what they had in common was that they knew me in different contexts. So it painted a broader sort of picture. And you keep that in mind, and no two portfolios look the same. So go for what feels right.
I delayed med school for an entire year because I didn't have anyone to write me a recommendation, or like what I thought I needed. So I'd been out of undergrad for 5 or 6 years at that point. I had a good MCAT score, and then I was like, oh shoot, what do I do now? Like, I like did the MCAT, and I was like, is that it? Like, I felt like that was the mountain, and it was only the beginning. And so I actually like called my undergrad's pre-health advising office and was like, hey, like, I got a degree from y'all. Like, can you help me? And they're like, no. And so I was like, oh, okay. And so I was like, I really don't know what to do now. Like, I haven't taken a science class in 5 years. Like, I'm not going to call up my 35,000 student undergrad. None of them will remember me. I didn't keep in contact with any of my professors. So I had good professional recommendations, but I didn't feel like I didn't know that I could apply that way. So I ended up doing a year of grad school just because I was like, I honestly have no idea what to do in this process. So that was the main reason I went to grad school. And I got great letters of recommendation from grad school. And I also had a great letter of recommendation from my principal, and a great letter of recommendation from a community person that I worked with in a community advocacy agency. But it was really, that was the hardest part for me. But I would echo Adam, like, if you're asking somebody for a recommendation, they need to be able to tell like a very personal story about you. Like, you shouldn't ask somebody for a recommendation if you don't think they can tell like a genuine story about who you are. Doesn't mean that they're going to write it in the letter, but that's like kind of a good gauge on who to ask. Because people were telling me like, ask this random online professor you took. And I was like, that doesn't see, like, they've never even seen my face. And so just make sure it's somebody that actually knows who you are.
I think actually to follow up on that, it wasn't for medical school, but I was applying for a grant during medical school, like a training grant. And I had actually asked one of my professors, would they give me a recommendation? And they said no. So that was definitely one of those things where I was like, what did I do wrong? And it turns out like her reasoning was, it's not that I don't like you, it's that I don't know you well enough to write you the letter of recommendation that you deserve. So I actually ended up putting her on my thesis committee because I knew that she was going to give me very good feedback, not for a later letter of recommendation, but she was honest with me. So I ended up getting recommendations, obviously from like my PI, and then I asked actually one of the groups one of the student activity groups I was in. I asked her for her letter because she saw me in like a social setting and like a leadership position as well. So not just a scientific perspective, but also like, who are you? I know it's really scary for me. I would rather take the MCAT another 5 times and ask for a letter of recommendation ever again in my life. So what I recommend is get that out of the way first if you're like me, and just write those emails, figure out who you're going to ask. And if they say no, don't take it personally.
So I took a slightly different approach. So because I had worked in sales for a bit, I kind of learned how to schmooze a little bit. And when I was in sales, I was taught always be networking. always be networking, always be networking. And so I kind of go through life constantly networking, but, and so if you're somebody who's like this, I'll tell you what I like to do is I like to ask someone for a small favor, something small. If we're talking about a book that they've read, could I borrow it? Or, you know, could you help me with just something, I don't know, something trivial, menial. And once somebody says yes to helping you on something, it's a lot easier to get them to say yes to help you something again. And so if you want to look at it from like a manipulative standpoint, that's one way you could go about it. The other way you could go about it, to rope another question that somebody asked into this, somebody asked, how did you deflect naysayers? One of the ways I deflected naysayers was by saying, well, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do exceptional work and make you have to watch it happen. I'm not going to ask for your help. I'm going to do a great job, and you're going to have to sit there and acknowledge it. And in doing so, a lot of professors, when I went back to school, they liked me. I don't know why. I can really get under people's skin. I know that probably doesn't sound shocking, but I can get under people's skin. But they liked me, and I worked hard for them. I worked hard for them. When I messed up in the lab one day, and I had that problem fixed by 9 a.m. the next day, because I was not going to have my professor show up and ask me why we weren't going to publish, because I didn't do something on time to get a deadline. And so it was a combination of working real hard for the right people who aren't naysayers, working really hard to work with those people, and always be networking a little bit. Never really hurts. Have a business card.
Be networking. How'd you find the research opportunity that you want to work on?
The first one I ever got was my chemistry professor came up to me and asked me if I wanted to get involved in something, and my thought process was yes. The project I'm working on now, I had to ask 7 or 8 faculty members at my school before anybody said yes, and you know, I just kept asking. I'm going to keep pitching the idea and keep asking. Somebody's either going to say yes, or I'm just going to do it. And eventually somebody said yes.
I think I'm in the very small percentage of students that apply to medical school with 0 research experience. So I probably am a little different than the rest of the group. I did like a tiny amount in grad school, but it was actually after I'd already applied to medical school, so it wasn't even on my resume. But that was like my first experience, and it was literally just a professor who I went up to and I was like, I've honestly never done research and I'm applying to medical school. I feel like I should try it. And she was like, yeah, come on to my lab. We can see how that goes. But I think the longer I waited to try and get into research, the harder it seemed, because it felt like everybody else knew what they were doing and I didn't. But kind of once you just jump in the door, there's so many different types of research that once I was in medical school, now I just literally just keep all the doors open. I just kind of do all the things that are interesting to me. And in doing that, have found a bunch of opportunities to do interesting research. I haven't really gone and sought it out as much as it's sort of fallen in my lap as I continue to do other things.
We have people asking both about what recommendations do you have for forcing yourself to network, because that's really what it comes down to. But then also, what recommendations do you have for self-reflection? So are there exercises that journaling, or books that you read, or ways that you skilled yourself up on both these things?
Definitely. I transformed myself in my 20s. Absolutely transformed who I was in my 20s. I don't dislike who I was before that, but I needed to go from being a boy to a man, and I needed to do it the right way. And when I saw that question come in, I was very glad that somebody asked it. Journaling is a big part of my life. Prayer is a big part of my life. But the thing that really got me down the path to both was I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which was written by a psychiatrist who was imprisoned at 2 concentration camps. And the entire, especially the first part of the book, is about how having meaning in life is kind of what drives you forward through adversity, and it's important to search for meaning and to find meaning. And that was a very, very big one for me, was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and Ralph Waldo Emerson's Self-Reliance. And then I started writing a lot more, and that still to this day, I try to write every night.
I cannot say the same. I'm really not great at like journaling or like listening, reading self-help. That's never been something that I'm great at. I just found somebody that was really that would let me talk about myself to them, which is honestly very uncomfortable. And so I had a hard time writing or reflecting because I was in Teach for America and we reflected on everything out loud. So I was just really used to reflecting on my own flaws orally, I guess. And so for me, journaling it or like reading about it wasn't as helpful as sitting down with someone and saying, like, this is how things are going. This is who I am. Like, this is what I'm going through. And so I just found like kind of good sounding boards, I think. And that helped me a lot, especially in like the process of applying to medical school. As far as the networking, I still hate it. And I think the way that I got through, honestly, I've loved COVID. I've loved this part of COVID because all of the like small talk of every meeting has been completely removed. But before COVID, I was still in medical school and had to go to these things. It was like, women in orthopedics night, and you showed up and there were a bunch of like really cool doctors there, and you're there with 50 other med students who are way better at talking to people and way super impressive. And so I started just setting really small goals for what I would accomplish in those nights, which sounds silly, but I would go in and say, I'm going to talk to 3 doctors tonight, and I'm going to get one of them to give me their email address. And that was like my goal. And if I met that goal, I would like give myself permission to leave. And so small things, start little, and then like work your way up, and eventually it becomes a little more natural. I mean, and find a buddy who's really outgoing. I just found a friend who like would talk to anyone and they would just bring me into the conversation.
You can tell me if I'm being rude. Just say you're being rude. In my family, my oldest sister is a professional therapist. I'm a person that believes in therapy. It's okay to pay someone to listen to you, to help you do your self-reflection. Rachel, is that something that you found too?
Yeah, so I actually like went to a therapist for social anxiety because I was like, I cannot go to these events. And just like she gave me exercises and that was really helpful. Like I 100% am on board with like if you can find a flaw that you think you don't know how to get past, it's not necessarily a flaw, it's just something that you got to figure out a skill set for. Like I figured out skill sets for plenty of things in my life. That was just one I didn't know how to start with. So yeah. I mean, and I didn't have to pay for it. Medical school actually provided that for free. So that was super nice.
I also have a therapist.
Yeah, I have a psychiatrist. I'm glad you brought that up, Jed, because pre-meds, med students, doctors are very, very at risk for mental health, poor outcomes, burnout, suicide, disproportionate to the population. So to the audience, I would pose this question. You don't wait for your teeth to be rotting out of your head before you see a dentist. So why do you wait until you're completely out of your mind before you see a therapist? You should have a therapist. Practice mental hygiene, and you'll discover things within yourself that you otherwise might not have found. And there's something just inimitably powerful about someone who can articulate their nature with confidence, and that comes with work. So get a therapist.
Absolutely, I agree with that 100%. As someone who the things I struggle with tend towards the depression, that makes everything harder, right? So already having a relationship with someone is, can be literally life-saving.
Yes.
Medical school's tough too. I mean, it's really worth it, but there's things that you go through in medical school that like sometimes your family just doesn't understand, that like my husband can't understand. And so having somebody else that you can talk to that kind of can follow your path and figure that out is really beneficial. And like Adam said, like before things really hit the fan. Because when things do hit the fan, to know who to call is crucial.
Or to already have a set of here's my first action steps, right? Of ways that I can start, can really head things off ahead of time.
I mean, I dealt with that in between first and second year of med school. I started having night terrors. I woke up one day having ripped down part of my ceiling in my sleep, and the precipitating event was that my mother was diagnosed with lung cancer midway through my first year of med school, and I mean, for all the great coping techniques I thought I had, and for all the writing and the man search for meaning, for all that, when it comes down to brass tacks, sometimes you just need a professional sitting across from you who's able to guide you a bit, and sometimes you just got to accept that. And And I'm really glad that I did. And I had good people in my life pushing me in that direction. My mom is okay, just for the record. But, you know, it's just, you don't know what's going to prop up. And so what's going to, you know, crop up midway through school, midway through life. So yeah, establishing care like you would with a PCP, like you would with a dentist, you know, you just establish care. And be a model for your patients, because you're going to have patients who are going to be hesitant to do it as well. And I tell you, I had somebody recently who was really hesitant to start seeing a therapist, and I was able to say to them, well, you know how it's helped me, and it's done this and then that. In fact, that thing that you like about me, that you just complimented me about, came from therapy. That wasn't there, and now they see one, and they're enjoying it. So be a model for your patients.
Although I will say that also, like dating, sometimes the first therapist you see is not the right therapist.
True.
That's right. You give it 2 to 3 sessions, and if it doesn't work, if you don't connect, if you feel like they don't understand you, it's okay to shop around.
It's also
Not
like
necessarily
dating.
your fault. Yeah. All right, we only have 5 minutes left. I don't know how that happened. So each of you, we got a room full of pre-meds. What is your best tip, your best piece of advice? What's the thing that you needed to hear someone say as you were going through those hard times?
I needed one of my professors before I got into medical school. So I was a history, like I said, I was a history poli-sci major. I love history. I love history. I do still enjoy law. And I used to have this internal battle. I wanted to teach. I wasn't sure if I wanted to teach medicine or teach history, and I wanted to be a physician, and I wanted to do all these things. And I said, am I going to be able to do them as a physician? You know, I want to, you know, be first and foremost dad and father, you know, father and husband, and like I want that first, and then medicine. And she said to me, Henry, nothing has to define you. No one thing has to define you. And that was what I needed to hear. And my life has not been the same since she said that to me. That resonated, it stuck, and it's the absolute truth. No one thing has to define you. No one thing says who you are. No one person says who you are other than you. And so pursuing, what Adam said before was so spot on. Life is going to be short, so if you might as well spend it finding fulfillment, and let that be what defines you. And if you do that, no matter what else happens here, you're not going to look back on your life with regret. And that's the key point. You won't look back with regret if you just find fulfillment and let nothing external define you.
Yeah, I think somebody finally said to me, like, there is no right way to do this. And that kind of did it. Like, everything that you've done in your life has put you on a path to go wherever you want to go. And like, only you can choose that next step. So it doesn't, just because you don't fit the mold, like, it doesn't matter. Like, everything that you've done has merit, and everything you've done has put you in a place where you can now make this next choice. So stop thinking about all the things that everyone else is doing and just keep doing the things that you enjoy doing and that you want to do because you think it serves other people in a good way. And I saw that somebody put in a question about marriage. I don't think there's a good time to do anything with med school. I mean, live your life and do the things you're going to do. I got married the Saturday before I started my GI unit, and I was back in school on Monday. And I'm going to have a kid in med school. And like, that's just kind of how life goes. You just live your life and you keep on going. I mean, don't plan your life around med school. Like, let med school be part of your life.
My firstborn son is due on March 15th. Just go for it.
I think the two things that got me through, the first was that I acknowledged that it was difficult. I think for me, I'm someone who doesn't like platitudes like, oh, well, it'll all work out, or, you know, there's a plan for everything. And if it doesn't work out, everything like that. For me, I mean, some people like that. For me, I didn't like that. For me, I was like, I really appreciate it when people were like, I know it's hard. What can I do to support you? And it was something like, here's some candy, go get a donut, then go cry in the room, and then come back. So I think just realizing that sometimes it's going to suck, but the other thing that really helped was overall, I did enjoy it. So looking back at some things, like I hated writing secondaries, I hated writing, you know, the primary, but looking back, it honestly wasn't that bad. And, you know, I learned a lot. I got to meet a lot of really interesting people who have changed my perspective on things, and I got to where I wanted to go. It didn't turn out exactly as I planned, perfectly fine. could have done things maybe a little bit the better way, but I don't have any regrets with how I chose it. So I think just, acknowledging it's okay. It's okay if it's hard, but, have a plan to get through that, have your support group. I think the idea of like therapy is so fantastic. And I know that during grad school, research is failing, 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 failing. So having people there with me to help me through that and not even to just give me advice, but just to throw candy my way was really, really helpful.
I would say, one, success is the thing that happens when you have failed enough times. So don't avoid failure, because avoiding failure is tantamount to avoiding success. Second, someone once sent me a meme and it said, talent hits a target no one else can see, or no one else can hit, but genius hits a target no one else can see. And I thought at first, I guess some people are just more talented and can see things. But the fact of the matter is that all of you can see something that other people can't see. And it might be your perspective or the way you perceive something or whatever. When you grow, when you take that authenticity and that perspective and you refine it to a level of mastery, then you become a genius. It's not something you're born with. So go and become all that you can be. And the third thing I would say is that there is a literal pandemic of poor mental health in physicians, and you're not going to help anyone if you're burnt out or dead. In the last 3 weeks, 2 people I know have committed suicide in medical school. It's an annual tradition for me to receive that text message. So stop it. Put self-care first. Exercise every day or every day on a schedule. Eat well. Sleep regularly. Spend time with the people who matter. And don't ever, do not ever sacrifice that. Even if you have an exam tomorrow that you're underprepared for, exams can be made up, but your life is a single thing, and every decision you make matters. So put yourself first. That's what I have to say.
Ask for help.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah. Thank y'all so much for being vulnerable and sharing the straight facts. Thanks y'all for being here. Now I do a silly thing, and this feels extra awkward coming from that end, but I write parody test prep songs, and I promised that I would play one. So I want to finish with a parody test prep song, and thank all of you for being here. You've done wonderful work today with us. We're so glad you came. Here we go. I'm gonna try my best on the med school test. I'm gonna try till I can't try no more. Try my best on the med school test. I'm gonna try until I earn my score. Mcat is the test, give it full court press. Can't do nothing less, gotta give my very best. Working in my course, Kaplan is the source. Powerful like horse, test just can't resist my force. Can't nobody trick me nothing. Can nobody trick me, nobody trick me nothing. Can nobody trick, I'm gonna try my best on the med school test. I'm gonna try till I can't try no more. Try my best on the med school test. I'm gonna try until I earn my score. Keep working hard, y'all. Wherever you are in your journey, we got something for you. If you're just starting, sign up for a question a day or something. If you're ready for that MCAT, remember we're doing that all access thing. So now's a great time to start. And if you're preparing your application, make sure you come back March 10th for Maria's personal statement workshop or book time to actually work with one of our great admissions consultants like Maria or Adam. Thanks for being here, y'all. Keep that head up, keep working hard, and let us know how we can help you. We know you can do this. We know you will do this. And if we can help you in any part of it, we would so like to. Take care, everybody.